We are now. That's the main thing.
Thank you. Everything good evening, everybody, and welcome. Sorry about that. System went down 5 minutes beforehand, and all of a sudden, it went down. But anyway, how are you, Jane?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, I'm doing fine. I understand about systems going down. It's very frustrating, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It always goes down on me. I don't know why, but it's probably trying to tell me something. But anyway, tell everybody about yourself because we've got a lot more listening on radio now, and tell them about yourself.
Okay. So I am, in case you don't know about this, I'm going to mention the D word. That is death. Or end of life, as maybe is a gentler way to put it. And the reason that I talk about this and why my work is all about this is because in 2011, my husband died, and that was a huge shock to us because we hadn't expected it. He was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and he died a year later. I wrote about that in my first book, Gifted by Grief, and the impact that that had on my life. And readers really liked the chapter where I had written about the questions that I'd asked Philip before he died. And these were things, they were really practical questions. Things like, what are your passwords? What kind of coffin do you want? How do you want your body to be dressed? Stuff that people don't talk about, but is really important to know. And even though I didn't really want to ask him these questions, somebody else had told me I needed to do it. We did eventually do it, and believe it or not, we had a good time doing it. Now, the result of this is that when I wrote about all this, I kept getting people saying to me, oh my goodness, I need to do those questions too. I need to answer them. And long story short, that has led to me setting up a social enterprise, Before I Go Solutions, where we now help people to make their end-of-life plans, which is essentially what Philip and I were doing at the time. And that's mainly what we do. We have products and programs for that. And we also have a training program where we're training people to be end-of-life plan facilitators. And that's because we've discovered that even when people know that this is a good idea to do, they quite often don't do it without a little bit of help, a bit of hand-holding, a bit of guidance along the way.
Good, good. Well done. Thank you very much. So, what are the signs of somebody dying?
What are the signs of somebody dying? Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Mostly people these days will take quite a long time to die. They get frailer and frailer. And you've probably seen that with older people that you know, they just sort of go downhill very slowly over a longer period of time. There are, of course, other ways to die suddenly, like a heart attack or an accident or something like that, but they're not as common. The most common way is very slowly. So what you'll notice is people who are coming towards the end is that their world gets a little bit smaller and they're not actually actively dying, but they begin to get more things wrong with them. And after a point, those things that are wrong kind of take over a bit. And you can see that somebody kind of becomes less engaged with life. They're not quite so interested. And at some point, something will happen. It might be a fall. It might be that they are taken into hospital for some other reason. It might be that they just feel like they're giving up the ghost. And so it's a very slow process, and it happens differently for everybody. Now, I'm giving a kind of general thing here because I'm not, I would say, qualified to say exactly how it happens in the last few days or few hours even. because I haven't seen that many people die, but there's lots of resources on my website which do show that, especially an interview with a woman called Dr. Catherine Mannix. So put that in beforeigosolutions.com, have a search for that, and you'll find it. And that's a really good interview.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. When you were preparing for the death of your close one, what kind of things were you preparing for your husband?
Well, the thing is, I didn't do it for my husband, which is how I discovered it was really important to do it. But we did do it, me and my siblings, for my mum and dad. So my mum and dad, who died in 2018, they both had, they had read my second book, Before I Go, The Essential Guide to Creating a Good End of Life Plan. There it is. And that in that book, it tells you all the things that you need to do. And they had completed a workbook that I also provide, which with all the answers to their questions, with all the answers to the questions. So by this time, these were fairly expanded questions from the ones that I'd originally asked my husband. So you get an opportunity to list all your everything about your money, where it is and all that kind of stuff. You get an opportunity to say the location of your will and your power of attorney and your advance directive. Now, you might never have heard of those terms before. You've probably heard of will, but if you haven't heard of a power of attorney or an advance directive, then those are legal documents that are actually incredibly useful, especially in these days when people live longer, but not necessarily in such good health. And then there's these days we have to think about our digital life. People carry on being alive, if you like, on social media and in all their accounts and everything, unless somebody takes care of it. And that is made much easier if you appoint somebody to be like a digital executor, if you like, after you've gone. And then, of course, you might want to think about how you want to be remembered. I call that a living legacy, because if you're thinking about that while you're alive, then you're alive still, and wanting to and thinking about how you want to be remembered. So, for example, you might start to create a compilation of favorite recipes that your family love, or you might put together a playlist that you love that people afterwards will be able to associate with you. Or you might do a little video, or create some kind of a memory box. And especially if there are significant birthdays for people, you might want to leave a message for them to be opened or listened to or viewed on that particular birthday. All sorts of things that are possible these days, but you have to think about it in advance. That's the thing that people most often don't want to do.
Yeah. Something happened to me when I was younger. Legal in General knocked on my door, and when I was 16, and ever since I had a pension with them.
Very good.
Also, a while back, I made sure that my funeral was taken care of before I, pass away, whatever, if anything happened to me.
Yeah.
And because I'm a Christian person, I arranged, I got that all arranged, and sometimes when we're doing things like that, I know we've got to arrange it and we've got to be prepared, but sometimes it's quite upsetting.
Yeah, it can be. And of course, that's why people don't want to do it. Now, first of all, you were very sensible, Steve, and even at such a young age as well. Most people are not like that. Most people get to even quite an older age without having thought about that at all. Or if they have thought about it, they haven't said anything to anyone. And lots of people don't want to mention this subject for fear of offending someone or for upsetting them, just like you said. Yeah. But the thing is, what we've discovered in our work over the last 5 years is that more often than not, when there's one brave person who is able to introduce the topic, and that could be any aspect of it, then actually there's quite often, well, in fact, more often than not, people are grateful that there is an opportunity to speak about it. So, for example, I've learned, even in a very blunt way, I've learned that when I'm, in a maybe a social situation or a networking situation, whatever, and somebody asks what I do and I tell them, there's usually a stunned silence because, you know, most people don't mention this word death. They don't talk about end of life.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is that if I keep my mouth shut after I've told them what I do, into that sort of gap, somebody has a story to tell. And once one person has told the story, somebody else has a story to tell. So we all have stories because we all experience this in one way or another. And all that is needed is permission for that to be talked about, or for those stories to be shared, and maybe for something to be learnt as a result of that.
Yeah. I've got a friend who works in the mortuary, and long time we met after like a school reunion. And I said, "What are you doing now?" He said, "Well, I work in the mortuary." And I thought, "What?" You know,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, you know, he's got a job to do. You know what I mean? And he said he was and he said, because you know, because I'm a Christian too, I believe like looking after people, you know, and to me, you know, they die and their spirits and go. And I said, what do you like about it? And he said all aspects of it, but at the end of the day, it's just looking after the body, you know,
Yeah.
because the body still needs to be looked after.
It does need to be looked after because it has provided, the way that I think about it is that it has provided a lovely home for the spirit of that person. And depending on your beliefs, you know, you may believe that the spirit continues or not, but whatever happens, whatever your belief is, there will be a body left after. And part of the grieving process is to honor that body and to take care of it, perhaps in the way that the person, when they were in the body, if you like, wanted. Certainly, if while you're alive, you've made some notes or talk to people about what sort of thing you would want to happen with your body, it makes it much easier for people afterwards because they're grieving. And, you know, it's really hard to do things like that when you're grieving.
Why is it so hard to talk about death?
Well, I think, first of all, there's this thing of if we talk about it, we might make it happen, you know, a bit of superstition there. Secondly, people are afraid of offending other people, and some people do get offended. Afraid of trampling on somebody else's toes or causing upset in the family, raising an issue that apparently shouldn't be talked about, but maybe you didn't know. There's a lot of fear around it, but actually it's the same with most fear. You know, it's usually the fear of the fear itself. And that's why I say there only needs one person to have some courage. And courage, remember, when you're feeling courageous, well, you can't feel courageous really, because when you're being courageous, you're feeling terrified usually.
Yeah,
but you do it anyway.
I found so I was kind of like I remember going to my mother-in-law's funeral about 10, 12 years ago now. And the trouble was when I went there, it was in Newcastle, and they do different things up there. They have like a wake, but when they have a wake where they, you know, they get drunk and everything. And I remember kind of like going in there, and I thought, yeah, it's not going to be no problem. It's going to be cool. So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden it just kicks off. You know, my mum left you that. My mum left you this. I wanted the earrings. You know, and it was like, oh my God, is this what happens at a wake?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that's the sort of thing that can be taken care of in advance if people are willing to talk about it, willing to make agreements, and the person who's doing this preparation is willing to write it down. And even if you want it to be legally upheld, it can be put in your will as well. But written it down on a piece of paper in a death folder. I always say to people, have a death folder either on your laptop, but preferably a real one. Because, you know, if you die suddenly, somebody is not going to be suddenly searching your phone or your computer, because they probably won't be able to get into it. So better to have an actual physical thing. And these days we still need to have physical wills and powers of attorney. So until that changes, better to have a physical folder and let people know where it is.
Okay, and lastly, can you tell people what your website is and how they contact you?
Yes, of course. It's beforeigosolutions.com. And there's all sorts of free stuff there. There's all sorts of articles that I've written about all aspects of that I've mentioned here, and probably more as well. So yeah, free courses and products to buy as well, whatever.
Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you once again, and every success for the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. There you go, guys. Right, I've got to go because I've got to go and get ready. As I've got to go to a meeting. You know, it doesn't just it just goes on and on and on. I'm going to be back around about 9 o'clock. Please watch Jen Tommy. It's so funny. Honestly, I'm going to be back. I've got a meeting at 7 o'clock, but I'm going to be back around about 8. So, but then I'm going to be on at 9 o'clock for you. In the meantime, be careful. Enjoy the sunshine, what we got left of it. But be careful of the heat because, you know, it's really, really hot. Right, okay. See you later. Bye-bye.